Let's take a look at where we left off. If I press play here, and let's just take a look at our game view here. I can drive around. Actually, let me adjust my aspect ratio so it's the 9 by 16 one. So it matches more of our actual game view. But we have all of these enemies coming in. I can move my ship. I can't shoot or anything or take damage yet, but we'll get to all that stuff in future lessons. Then I have these slower enemies. What I'd like to introduce you to now is essentially another looping construct called a while loop. We've talked about for each loops. We've talked about for loops. But while loops are great because you can have it continuously loop a group of code. So it's similar to a for loop, even infinitely. And it's based on a specific true-false condition. So let's take a look at those. So the first, when you hear a while loop, there's really two. There's a do while loop and there's a while loop. So let's take a look at creating a do while loop first. So I'm just going to hit Control D here. And I'm in my enemy spawner script. And let's just move this down a little bit. And I'm going to make I'm just repurposing this. So I'm going to make this private variable of type Boolean. And I'm going to delete all of this equals up to here. And I'm going to type in is looping. Let's save that. And what this is going to represent is if our loop is looping, it's constantly looping. And most of the stuff, the Booleans, you'll usually put an is in front of it. Like, is it doing something or is it not? Which is really, because remember, this is a true or false, 0 or 1, is what you store inside of this variable. Right, so we have this coroutine here, which calls the spawn enemies method here. And then what it does is inside of all of this code here, we have like yield return, wait for seconds. And this is the time between waves. And so it'll run this code inside of here while my time is in between waves. What I'd like to do is continuously run all of this code in this for each loop while, I want to do that while it is looping. So it'll constantly be running my, again, the code that loops or sort of spawns enemies. So let's take a look at that. So I want you to be conscious of where this for each loop starts. And you can click on this first opening curly brace here and it'll show you the end. And this is where a lot of people kind of get messed up. But I'm going to type do here, hit enter. And you could see that it automatically created my while loop here. So my for each loop ends here. So I'm just going to hit enter here and just give myself a little bit of space. And I'm going to click on this line and hold Alt and push my down arrow key. And just make sure that all of that is, this entire for each is inside of my while loop here. Then I'm going to hit Control Enter, Control Alt Enter, and just kind of let that clean up the formatting for me. So it's going to do everything inside of here while this expression is true. Now it's giving me an error because it doesn't know what expression is. And remember what I told you guys before was it's checking while this is true. So while it is looping, right? We're going to constantly run this code. I think by default it sets is looping to false. And you can see here it's off. So I'm going to hit Control S to save this. And what we'll notice is when I press play here, it's not going to run any of this code at all because it's going to only do that code as long as my while loop is running, right? So let me clear up this space too a little bit. So let's press play here and you'll notice that there are no enemies going. We have no enemies spawning, right? Oh, actually we do. Why is it? Oh, because it called it once while it's looping. So if we turn this on, it should loop forever. If I turn this off, did I not save it? It should be saved. Let's see. Oh, actually, sorry. It's a little early. This do loop, it'll automatically run this at least once, and then it'll check this to see if it's accurate. So let me change my time between waves to 0 so that they just kind of come out quickly. So if I press play here, it should run this code in here, which, remember, this actually runs 2 waves. We have a yield in return, and then we have another one. So here's our second wave, right, of enemies. But if I turn this on, it should continuously keep spawning or running these. But actually the problem is we call this coroutine at start. We're not constantly calling this an update. So let me stop this. Let me turn this on and press play one more time. And now we should have continuous waves. It'll continuously run this as a never-ending loop. And then we have our time between waves is 0. So you can see these are coming out, and then we have these other ones coming too. So now we have a never-ending wave of enemies. And the only reason it was off a little bit was because, again, we only call it once here. So I had clicked it on while during gameplay, so it had never had an opportunity to call this method again. Right. So the next thing I want to do is let's go into our prefabs folder, and let's select our enemy ship, which really just has this pathfinding script on it, and our player ship, which again just has it has two scripts. It has a player input ship script, and then it has a player ship controller here, which it looks like my padding got a little messed up there, through constant changes. So if I press play here, we have our input, I'll be able to leave. So I'll go back and edit that padding. Oh, actually the padding is fine. I guess that's good. So let's go ahead and work on just setting up our players, and then the next lesson we'll go into adding enemy. So let's select our enemy ship and our player at the same time and add a rigid body 2D component. And let's expand those. And I want to make it, instead of body type dynamic, I want to make it kinematic. Now the reason why we would make it kinematic instead of dynamic is because we're actually moving our enemies and our player in code, and we're not moving them inside the physics system. So we could still take advantage of the rigid body, but again, we don't need to use any of the physics of the movement. Now, another thing is with a rigid body, in order to register collisions, we need a collider. So I'm going to type in a circle collider 2D. And then what I can do here is double click each one, and that'll take me inside of here. And I could take a look at how small the circle collider is, and I can click on this to edit the size. So I'm just going to make it roughly the same size as this ship. And that way, if we run inside of it, it'll, like our player will seek damage. Same thing with this guy. You could see, let me click on 2D here. It's a bit small, so I'm going to click on this, and I'm just going to expand these out a little bit like this. I mean, this guy might be better for capsule collider because he's kind of shaped like a capsule. And, well, I think this is good. Something like this. If we miss the nose, it's fine. It's small enough. And I think that's good for now. What I would do is, for now, we'll just leave is looping on, and then later in code, if our player dies, we can turn off is looping. We can call that from our script.